Just getting ready to ship off some more books. Hello everyone, welcome to my morning musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm in the process of responding to Mr. Hal Lindsey, who has been making the false accusation that preterism is a dangerous doctrine, that it teaches, quote, replacement theology. Now you have to understand what Mr. Lindsey is saying. He is saying that biblically the nationalistic people of Israel still remain as God's chosen people in some way. However, according to their unbelief and due to their unbelief, God has temporarily set them aside and is functioning with the church, dealing with the church until the rapture, at which point of time He will then remove the church from the earth and begin once again His exclusive dealings with the nation of Israel. Now, in the first place, if that's not replacement theology, as I pointed out in a previous section, I really don't know what is. But I want to really drive this home. I asked you to consider in my other section on replacement theology, and I urge you to go back and look at that. You know, which is the more dangerous replacement theology? And I want to challenge you to think of several things this morning. Now, Mr. Lindsey acknowledges that the church is a spiritual entity. It's a spiritual temple. It's a spiritual people with spiritual sacrifices, etc., which will one day be replaced with and by a literal temple, a literal priesthood, literal sacrifices, in a literal city. So I want you to consider with me the following. Now remember, Mr. Lindsey says it's horrific, it's awful, it's false doctrine to say that Israel and her things has been replaced by Christ and His things. Okay, so consider with me which is worse. To replace a spiritual, heavenly Jerusalem with an earthly, carnal Jerusalem. Which is worse? Which is worse? To replace a spiritual temple, the body of Christ, with a physical temple made with hands. Now, according to Daniel, by the way, the kingdom, the temple, was to be a kingdom and temple not made with hands. Daniel 2:44. So which is worse? To replace the spiritual temple, not made with hands, with a physical temple made with hands. Which is worse? To replace a spiritual priesthood, and John said, he, that is Christ, has made us to be a kingdom of priests. Peter said, we offer up spiritual sacrifices unto God acceptable through Jesus Christ. So is it worse to replace the spiritual temple, spiritual sacrifices, spiritual priesthood, with physical temple, physical altar, physical priesthood? Which is worse? And which is worse? To replace the one-time, for all-time, perfect sacrifice of Christ, which was foreshadowed by all of those physical sacrifices, to replace His perfect sacrifice with those animal sacrifices which could never, ever take away sin, and which God said He never desired in the first place. Hey, which is worse? Mr. Lindsey says it's wrong to replace all of those physical things with the spiritual things of Christ. But I ask you, is it worse? Is it not worse to replace the spiritual things of Christ with the carnal, material, physical, ineffective things of Israel? I think that's a real serious issue. You see, what I'm saying here is that the church is not at all replacement theology. It is fulfillment theology. And that means that God, instead of rejecting Israel arbitrarily and capriciously, God fulfilled his promises to Israel in the way that he originally intended, which of course is not the way the dispensationalists think it was supposed to happen. I think I'll stick with God on this. Hey, thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We will have more on the flip side. We'll see you then.